The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the cold light of distant stars. For over 5,000 years, the Vorthak Empire had ruled this darkness with absolute authority. Their massive ships moved through, the void like predators, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly purple sheen that seemed to absorb the light around them. General Zekros stood motionless on the command deck of his flagship, the Dominator. His towering 8-foot frame cast long shadows across the bridge as his forearms worked efficiently at different control panels. The Vorthak were a race born for conquest, their bodies evolved for war and their minds sharpened by millennia of victory. Zekros had personally overseen the subjugation of over 300 worlds, each one falling before the might of his fleet without meaningful resistance. "General," called his second-in-command, Captain Nexor, his voice carrying the typical mechanical tone of their species. "Our scouts have detected a new system in Sector 7749. Initial scans show a blue planet with primitive lifeforms." Zekros turned his massive head, his 6 eyes focusing on the holographic display that materialized before him. The planet appeared peaceful, covered in swirling white clouds and vast oceans. It looked no different from the countless other worlds they had conquered and stripped of resources. Yet something about this particular world caught his attention. "What is the technological level of the inhabitants?" Zekros asked, his voice deep and commanding. "Primitive chemical propulsion, basic electronics, and scattered nuclear capabilities," Nexor replied. "They appear to be in the early stages of space exploration, completely defenseless against our technology." On the surface of the planet called Earth, Captain Marcus Vale sat in the control room of the Kepler Deep Space Monitoring Station, unaware that alien eyes were studying his world from the depths of space. Vale was a career military officer who had transitioned to space operations when humanity began its tentative steps toward the stars. His weathered face showed the lines of a man who had seen conflict, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold. The monitoring station was humanity's most advanced early warning system, designed to track asteroids, space debris, and the occasional piece of space junk that might threaten Earth. Vale had been on duty for 12 hours straight, his attention focused on the steady stream of data flowing across his screens. "Captain," called Technician Riley from across the room, "I'm picking up some unusual readings from the outer system. Multiple objects moving in perfect formation, too large to be natural." Vale immediately moved to examine the data. What he saw made his blood run cold. The objects were enormous, each one easily the size of a city block, and they were moving with purpose and coordination that could only mean one thing: intelligence. Meanwhile, Dr. Nora Hayes was working late in her laboratory at the International Astrophysics Institute. She was a brilliant scientist who had devoted her life to understanding the cosmos, searching for signs of life beyond Earth. Her calculations and theories about alien civilizations had earned her both praise and skepticism from her peers. Tonight, those theories were about to become terrifying reality. Her computer began alerting her to anomalous energy readings from deep space. The patterns were unlike anything in nature, showing complex mathematical relationships that could only be artificial. Her hands trembled as she ran the data through every analysis program she had, hoping she was wrong about what she was seeing. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself. But the evidence was undeniable. The energy signatures were not only artificial but showed technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved. General Zekros continued his study of the blue planet, noting the primitive cities and scattered population centers. The inhabitants seemed to live in relative peace, unaware of the dangers that lurked in the galaxy beyond their small world. They had no idea that their planet was about to become another conquest in the Vorthak Empire's endless expansion. "Begin standard observation protocols," Zekros commanded. "I want to know everything about these creatures before we begin the integration process. Study their technology, their social structures, and their potential usefulness to the Empire." The Vorthak had perfected the art of conquest over thousands of years. They would observe their targets, learning their weaknesses and strengths, before delivering an ultimatum that no primitive species could refuse. Surrender meant survival as slaves, while resistance meant complete annihilation. As the alien fleet took position in the outer reaches of Earth's solar system, humanity continued its daily routine, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire future hung in the balance. In offices and homes across the globe, people went about their lives, working, loving, and dreaming of tomorrow, never imagining that tomorrow might bring visitors from the stars. Captain Vale stared at his screens, knowing that what he was seeing would change everything. The objects were maintaining their distance, but their very presence was a message. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their visitors did not appear to be friendly. The stage was set for an encounter that would reshape not only Earth's destiny, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. The emergency session at the United Nations had been called within hours of Dr. Nora Hayes confirming the alien presence. World leaders gathered in an unprecedented show of unity as the reality of first contact settled over humanity like a dark storm cloud. Catherine Ross of the United States stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to announce to the world. "Citizens of Earth," she began, her words being broadcast to every corner of the planet. "We are no longer alone in the universe. Alien vessels have been detected in our solar system, and we must prepare for the possibility that their intentions may not be peaceful." The reaction was immediate and global. In cities across the world, people stopped what they were doing to stare at screens and listen to radios. Fear, excitement, and disbelief mixed together as humanity faced the greatest moment in its history. Some panicked, others prayed, but many simply looked up at the sky with new understanding. Colonel Jason Rivers had served in conflicts across 3 continents, but nothing had prepared him for this assignment. Within hours of the announcement, he found himself leading the newly formed Global Defense Initiative, a hastily assembled organization tasked with coordinating Earth's military response to the alien threat. His makeshift command center buzzed with activity as officers from every nation worked together for the first time. "What's our current military capacity?" Rivers asked his aide, Lieutenant Torres, as they reviewed reports flooding in from around the world. "We have approximately 50,000 active aircraft, 200 naval vessels with missile capabilities, and 3 operational space stations," Torres replied. "But sir, based on the energy readings Dr. Hayes provided, our conventional weapons may not be effective against their technology." The answer came sooner than anyone expected. On the 3rd day after the initial detection, the alien fleet moved closer to Earth, their massive ships becoming visible even to ground-based telescopes. General Zekros had completed his observation phase and was ready to deliver the ultimatum that had brought thousands of worlds to their knees. The message came in perfect English, broadcast simultaneously across every communication frequency on Earth. The voice was deep and mechanical, carrying an authority that seemed to echo from the depths of space itself. "People of Earth," the message began, "you are now subjects of the Vorthak Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. You will surrender all weapons, submit to our authority, and prepare for resource extraction. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. You have 72 hours to comply." The silence that followed was deafening. In the Global Defense Initiative Command Center, Colonel Rivers felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders. Around him, officers from dozens of nations stared at their screens in shock. Engineer Beth Palmer had been working around the clock since the aliens arrived, analyzing every piece of data they could gather about the alien technology. A brilliant, mechanical engineer who had spent her career designing cutting-edge aircraft, she now found herself humanity's best hope for understanding weapons and systems beyond anything Earth had ever seen. "Their ships use some kind of energy field for propulsion," she explained to the assembled military leaders via video conference. "The hull materials appear to be adaptive, changing properties based on external conditions. But every technology has weaknesses. We just need to find them." Dr. Hayes worked alongside Palmer, using her knowledge of theoretical physics to interpret the alien energy signatures. Together, they represented humanity's scientific response to an impossible challenge. Their laboratory had become the most important room on Earth, filled with hastily assembled equipment and displays showing alien ship configurations. The energy patterns suggest they're using controlled quantum field manipulation, Hayes explained to President Ross during a secure briefing. It's decades ahead of our current understanding, but the principles aren't completely foreign. We might be able to develop countermeasures. As the 72-hour deadline approached, something remarkable happened. The fear that had initially gripped humanity began to transform into determination. Messages of support and defiance flooded social media and communication networks. People who had never agreed on anything suddenly found common ground in their refusal to surrender their freedom. Colonel Rivers stood before the assembled representatives of Earth's military forces, knowing that his next words would determine whether humanity would fight or surrender. The weight of the moment was crushing, but his voice remained steady. "They expect us to bow down like every other species they've conquered," he said, looking each officer in the eye. "But they don't understand what they're dealing with. Humans don't surrender. We've faced impossible odds before and found a way to survive. Today we stand not as separate nations, but as one species fighting for our right to exist." The vote was unanimous. Earth would not surrender. General Zekros received the response exactly 72 hours after his ultimatum was delivered. Instead of surrender, he received a message from President Ross that would echo throughout the galaxy for generations to come. "To the Vorthak Empire," she said, her voice calm but filled with steel. "Humanity rejects your demands. We will not bow, we will not surrender, and we will not go quietly into slavery. If you want our world, you'll have to take it from us." The general's 6 eyes flashed with something that might have been respect or perhaps amusement. In 5,000 years of conquest, no primitive species had ever dared to defy the Vorthak Empire. These humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. "Prepare the attack fleet," he commanded. "It's time to teach these primitives the cost of defying the Empire." The attack came at dawn, just as Earth's morning sun painted the sky, in shades of gold and crimson. General Zekros had chosen this moment deliberately, knowing that the beauty of sunrise would make the contrast with destruction even more devastating. His assault fleet descended from the darkness of space like falling stars, their purple hulls gleaming with deadly intent. Commander Luke Sterling sat in the cockpit of his modified F-35 fighter, watching the alien ships approach through his helmet display. He was one of Earth's best pilots, a man who had earned his reputation in countless training exercises and combat missions. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Beside him flew 11 other pilots, all volunteers who knew they were likely flying to their deaths. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Base Command," came the voice of Colonel Rivers through their communication system. "You are humanity's first line of defense. Show them what we're made of." Sterling felt his heart pound as he activated the experimental weapons that engineer Beth Palmer had designed. The modifications were untested, built from theories about alien technology that might be completely wrong. But they were humanity's only hope against the massive ships that now filled the sky above major cities around the world. Lieutenant Grace Murphy watched the battle unfold from the Tactical Command Center, her mind racing as she analyzed the alien attack patterns. She was a military strategist who had studied every major conflict in human history, looking for patterns and weaknesses that could be exploited. Now she was applying that knowledge to an enemy unlike any humanity had ever faced. "They're using standard formation tactics," she reported to Colonel Rivers. "Their ships are massive, but they move like they've never faced serious resistance. They're not expecting us to fight back effectively." The first engagement lasted only minutes, but those minutes changed everything. Sterling's squadron used hit-and-run tactics, striking at the alien ship's weapon ports and shield generators before disappearing into cloud cover. The experimental weapons worked better than anyone had dared hope, creating small but significant damage to the supposedly invincible Vorthak vessels. When the first alien ship began to falter, its shields flickering and hull showing visible damage, a cheer went up in command centers across the globe. Humanity had drawn first blood against an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds. The impossible was happening. General Zekros stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. The primitive humans were actually damaging his ships, using crude but effective tactics that his forces had never encountered. These creatures were fighting with a desperation and creativity that defied all his previous experience with conquered species. "How are they penetrating our shields?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Their weapons appear to be designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in our defensive systems," came the reply. "They've somehow analyzed our technology and developed countermeasures." Dr. Hayes and Engineer Palmer watched the battle from their laboratory, their hearts racing as their theories were put to the ultimate test. The weapons they had designed in desperate haste were actually working, giving humanity a fighting chance against overwhelming odds. "The quantum resonance frequency is disrupting their shield harmonics," Hayes explained to Palmer as they monitored the combat data. "Your weapon modifications are creating interference patterns they can't compensate for quickly enough." The battle raged for 6 hours, with human forces using every advantage they could find. Pilots like Sterling pushed their aircraft to the limits, using Earth's atmosphere and geography in ways the aliens couldn't predict. Ground-based missile systems targeted weak points that Murphy had identified, while naval forces launched coordinated strikes from the oceans. When the smoke finally cleared, 3 Vorthak ships lay in ruins, their massive hulls scattered across the landscape like fallen monuments to an empire's arrogance. The remaining alien forces had retreated to regroup, something that hadn't happened in the Vorthak Empire's 5,000-year history. News of the victory spread across Earth faster than light itself seemed to travel. In every city, every town, every remote village, people looked up at the sky with new hope. Humanity had faced the galaxy's greatest military power and emerged victorious in their first encounter. But the impact went far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been enslaved for generations, the news traveled through secret communication networks maintained by resistance groups. For the first time in millennia, conquered species began to whisper a word they had almost forgotten: freedom. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the insectoid Zeth workers paused in their endless labor as word reached them. On the ocean world of Proxima 3, the aquatic Nereid people dared to dream of rebellion. Even in the deepest prison colonies, enslaved beings looked up at alien stars and wondered if change was finally possible. General Zekros faced a crisis unlike any in his military career. His reputation was built on swift, decisive victories against primitive species. Now he had to explain to the Vorthak High Command how a group of barely spacefaring humans had defeated his forces in their first encounter. "Increase fleet strength by 500%, he commanded. "These humans have proven more dangerous than anticipated. We will crush them completely in the next assault." But the damage was already done. The myth of Vorthak invincibility had been shattered, and across the galaxy, the seeds of revolution had been planted by humanity's impossible victory. The first message arrived 3 weeks after humanity's victory, transmitted through encrypted quantum channels that Earth scientists barely understood. Ambassador David Chen, a former diplomat who had spent his career mediating international conflicts, found himself facing the greatest diplomatic challenge in human history as he decoded the alien transmission. "People of Earth," the message began, translated through advanced linguistic algorithms, "we are the Kethera Collective, survivors from the Andromeda sector. Your victory against the Vorthak has given us hope for the first time in centuries. We wish to join your fight for freedom." Chen stared at the message in amazement. Humanity wasn't alone in their resistance. Across the galaxy, other species had been waiting for someone to strike the first blow against the Vorthak Empire. Within days, similar messages began arriving from dozens of different civilizations, each one offering to join what they were calling the Galactic Liberation Alliance. The Zeth from Kepler 442b were master engineers who had been forced to build Vorthak war machines for 300 years. Their message contained detailed schematics of enemy ships and weapon systems. The aquatic Nereid offered their knowledge of underwater warfare and stealth technology. Even the mysterious ethereal ones from the Outer Rim promised to share their advanced communication networks. Colonel Rivers found himself promoted to general as Earth became the unexpected headquarters of a galactic rebellion. His command center expanded daily as new species joined the alliance, each bringing unique skills and technologies that had been suppressed under Vorthak rule. "General," reported his new aide, Major Kim Nakamura, "we now have active resistance cells on over 200 worlds. The Vorthak are facing uprisings on 17 different fronts simultaneously." The transformation was remarkable. Engineer Beth Palmer worked alongside alien scientists whose names she couldn't pronounce, combining human ingenuity with technologies from across the galaxy. Together, they developed weapons and defensive systems that made even the mighty Vorthak fleets vulnerable. Dr. Hayes collaborated with the brilliant crystalline beings called the Luminar, whose understanding of quantum physics made human science look primitive. Yet they treated her as an equal, recognizing that innovation came not from advanced knowledge alone, but from the desperate creativity that humanity had shown in their darkest hour. Commander Sterling found himself training pilots from a dozen different species, teaching them the hit-and-run tactics that had proven so effective against Vorthak formations. His squadron had grown from 12 human fighters to a mixed fleet of 300 vessels from across the galaxy. The first major coordinated strike came 6 months after the initial contact. The target was the Vorthak supply depot at Rigel Station, a massive complex that provided resources for half the Empire's military operations. The attack force included human fighters, Zeth engineering ships, Nereid stealth vessels, and dozens of other craft representing the diversity of the rebellion. Lieutenant Grace Murphy coordinated the assault from her position aboard the new flagship Liberation, a vessel built using combined technologies from the Alliance. Her tactical displays showed friendly forces approaching from 7 different vectors, each group using strategies adapted from their own species' strengths. "All units, this is tactical command," she broadcast to the mixed fleet. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our own worlds anymore. We're fighting for the freedom of every species under Vorthak oppression." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human fighters used their atmospheric combat experience to weave between the massive station's superstructure. Zeth engineers disabled defense systems from the inside, using their intimate knowledge of Vorthak technology. Nereid vessels struck from unexpected angles, their cloaking technology rendering them nearly invisible until the moment of attack. General Zekros watched the assault unfold from his command ship, his tactical officers reporting disaster after disaster. The rebels weren't fighting like any enemy he had faced before. They combined the desperate fury of the humans with the technical expertise of species who had been building Vorthak weapons for centuries. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender demands from rebels on 47 different worlds. They're coordinating their attacks with the assault on Rigel Station." The Vorthak Empire, which had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 5 millennia, suddenly found itself fighting a war on hundreds of fronts simultaneously. Their forces were stretched thin, their resources divided, and their reputation for invincibility in ruins. Ambassador Chen worked tirelessly to coordinate the diplomatic aspects of the rebellion, establishing communication networks between species that had never interacted before. The alliance wasn't just a military force, it was becoming a new form of galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. "Each species brings something unique to our cause," he reported to President Ross during a secure transmission. "The humans brought the spark of rebellion, but it's taking all of us together to fan it into the fire that will burn down the Empire." The success at Rigel Station sent shockwaves throughout Vorthak space. For the first time in their history, the Empire was in retreat, abandoning outer territories to concentrate their forces around core worlds. But it was too late. The revolution had spread too far and gained too much momentum to be stopped. On Earth, people watched the news broadcasts with growing amazement as reports came in of liberated worlds and successful battles. Humanity had started as the underdog in a fight for survival, but they had become the catalyst for the greatest liberation movement in galactic history. The Vorthak Empire was crumbling, and at the center of its destruction stood a species that had been deemed primitive and worthless just months before. The final battle began in the shadow of Vorthak Prime, the Empire's ancient homeworld that had remained unconquered for over 5,000 years. Captain Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Unity, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled for the decisive assault. She had risen through the ranks during the 2-year war, earning respect from dozens of alien species who now followed her into the ultimate confrontation. "All fleet commanders report ready," announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the former Dr. Nora Hayes, who had first detected the alien presence. The scientific brilliance that had helped humanity understand Vorthak technology now served the Alliance as they prepared to end the Empire forever. The assembled fleet was a testament to the power of cooperation. Human vessels flew alongside, Zeth engineering ships, their hulls gleaming with adaptive armor technology. Nereid stealth cruisers moved like shadows between the larger vessels, while the crystalline ships of the Luminar pulsed with energy that could reshape matter itself. Over 3,000 vessels from 47 different species had gathered for this moment. General Zekro stood in his fortress on Vorthak Prime, surrounded by the last remnants of his once mighty empire. The past 2 years had been a nightmare of defeat after defeat as the rebellion spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Worlds that had been loyal for centuries turned against their masters, inspired by the example of the primitive humans who had dared to say no. "General," reported his aide, Captain Nexor, "our remaining fleet consists of 800 vessels. The rebels outnumber us nearly 4-1, and their technology has advanced beyond our projections." Engineer Beth Palmer worked frantically in the Unity's engineering section, making final adjustments to the quantum disruptor array that would disable the Vorthak's planetary defense grid. Beside her, alien engineers from a dozen species contributed their expertise to the weapon that would break the Empire's last stronghold. "The harmonic frequency is synchronized," she reported to Captain Stone. "When we activate the array, their shields will collapse completely, but we'll only have one shot at this." Ambassador David Chen broadcast the final ultimatum to Vorthak Prime, his words carried by communication networks that now spanned the entire galaxy. Behind him stood representatives of every species in the Alliance, united in their demand for freedom. "To the Vorthak Empire," he began, "your reign of terror is over. Surrender now and face justice for your crimes, or face complete destruction. The choice is yours." The response came not in words but in weapons fire, as the Vorthak fleet launched a desperate assault on the Alliance forces. The battle that followed would be remembered for millennia as the moment when tyranny died and freedom was born among the stars. Commander Luke Sterling led the first wave of fighters, his pilots now veterans of countless battles against Vorthak forces. They moved with perfect coordination, human instinct combined with alien technology, creating a force that the Empire could not match. Behind them came the capital ships, their weapons charged with the combined power of 47 civilizations. Lieutenant Grace Murphy coordinated the massive assault from her position in the tactical center, her displays showing thousands of moving icons as the largest space battle in galactic history unfolded. Her strategies, developed through years of studying Vorthak tactics, proved devastating as the Alliance forces systematically dismantled the Empire's defenses. The quantum disruptor fired exactly as planned, its energy wave washing over Vorthak Prime and collapsing the planetary shields that had protected the homeworld for millennia. Alliance forces poured through the gap, liberating cities that had known only oppression for thousands of years. General Zekros made his final stand in the Imperial Palace, surrounded by his last loyal guards. When Captain Stone herself led the assault team that breached the throne room, she found the Vorthak general standing proud despite his defeat. "You have won," he acknowledged, his voice carrying grudging respect. "But how will you rule what you have conquered? Every empire falls to the same corruption eventually." "That's where you're wrong," Stone replied. "We're not building an empire. We're building something better." The Free Galactic Federation was established 6 months later, with Earth serving as the neutral meeting ground where all species could gather as equals. President Catherine Ross, now elected as the Federation's first chancellor, stood before the assembled delegates representing hundreds of worlds. "Today marks not the end of one empire and the beginning of another," she declared, "but the birth of a new kind of civilization, one based not on conquest and fear, but on cooperation and mutual respect. Ambassador Chen worked tirelessly to establish the new government structure, ensuring that every species, no matter how small or seemingly primitive, had a voice in the Federation. The humans who had sparked the rebellion now served as mediators and peacekeepers, their unique perspective helping to resolve conflicts between vastly different civilizations. The transformation was remarkable. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources were restored using advanced alien technology. Species that had been enslaved for centuries learned to govern themselves again. The galaxy that had known only war for millennia began to experience the peace that came with true freedom.